My name is Jeremy Devins, and welcome back to the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast, where I share about Vedic astrology, the ancient Indian system of understanding our place in the universe by understanding what's happening in the universe and how it affects us personally. If you're new to the podcast, get your free birth chart at quietmindastrology.com, where I'll also send you free weekly horoscopes and updates you won't find anywhere else and exclusive offers. Today's episode is all about intuition versus overthinking. How do I know? Is it intuition or overthinking? This is a common question I get a lot, and how to address it. I'll talk about 5 ways to tell the difference, as well as several ways that you can strengthen your intuition and have a stronger relationship to it. And of course, if you want to go deeper into understanding yourself and the spiritual element of your human experience of the body, I teach that here in the spiritual side on the astrology podcast. And then I teach the more embodiment side in Quiet Mind Yoga. And I'll be opening the next yoga teacher training on 9/9/24. I'll be hosting a special event on that day. If you want to know all about that, just join the waitlist for the teacher training at quietmind.yoga/YTT. That's coming up 9/9/24, a special event all about applying yoga to your life. I think it's one of the most important life skills to have is understanding how to work with energy in the body. And when we understand this relationship to the body, then we have a lot more clarity of our thinking. So I'll talk about that a lot today as well. So, intuition, overthinking. I have a lot of experience with both of these. And someone actually asked me recently, too, of like, what do you do after a reading? How do you sort of close that energetic container after you've given an astrology reading? And for me, I almost always will just lay down, take a nap, or meditate, or do some sort of yoga practice, as simple as just doing down dog. Right, just the other day, I gave a session and I tried to lay down. I felt like I might need a nap. I felt like my energy was a little like I should maybe move, maybe I should rest. I'm not entirely sure. So I laid down for a minute and I felt like that wasn't the right thing. And then I moved over to do down dog, just holding down dog for as long as it took to feel like my energy sort of reset. And what exactly am I looking for to reset the energy? Well, it's an intuitive thing. It's hard to really put words to, but I'm sure you know that feeling. Like if your energy is a little scattered or restless or not quite centered, and then you do something like hold down dog for a couple minutes, or you take a nap, or you go for a walk, and then you feel like you're recentered again. You're back in yourself. Now, when you have a lot of demands with people around you and other things going on in your life with like lots of people, that can be even harder. And I actually just talked to a friend yesterday. She's going to be taking a whole month just to be by herself because she is just constantly with other people, working with others, with her partner, and just always. And she works with her partner. So it's just like nonstop, this sort of outward energy. And they have a small home and everything. So she's taking this whole month now to just recenter, get back to herself. And she's very experienced, very practiced. She's done many long silent sits for 10 days, 40 days, 30 days, these kind of things. So she knows her energy really well, but she's chosen to put a lot of energy out for a while, especially parents listening to this. You know what that's like. Or if you have a very active job, a lot of demands, a lot of people you're responsible for, you know what it feels like to have a lot of energy out and feel like you basically emptied your cup a lot. And then when it comes time to like make a decision, even like where to eat tonight or what to wear tomorrow, or bigger decisions like when to book a trip, or should you take this training, or should you buy this thing, or whatever, then the intuition is kind of fatigued and the sense of center and self is kind of lost. And then when you have that, and then now there's more emotional stuff going on and big relationship decisions and more stress from the work and more stress from a partner or children or family. Now you've got even less to give. You feel even more drained, more stressed. It becomes this vicious cycle until you do something to recenter. And that might be that you take a nap. A lot of people in modern times will like get home from a busy day and then watch Netflix. And as the owner of Netflix said, that their biggest competition is sleep. So they're trying to catch people in that time where they're like in between, they don't know what to do. might as well put on a TV show. And that's fine. It's fine to be entertained. No problem with that. That's very much part of our history as humans. Like we would sit around the campfire, tell stories. Stories is a great way for us to learn and integrate things, but not at the expense of our time to ourselves, right? And we would sit around the fire together because we spent most of the time maybe out foraging or hunting or not as much together or not as much like let's all gather around and share. Right now it's more like you get home and you crash and then you turn on the TV. That's sort of a common modern thing. I think a lot of people listening to this don't do that, but it can happen, no judgment or anything like that. But that's just an example of the ways in which that modern society in the West is like pulling us away from ourself even more. So then the average person might spend a lot of time giving, 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 and then time for themselves, and they're sort of just taking in information and not really in this still quiet place, which, like I said, just doing down dog for maybe it was like 3 minutes, just holding the pose for me the other day. And I felt right back to center in myself, clear again. And it's not that I'm not clear when I'm doing a reading, of course, like, but I'm a channel for the person and for the information. And I, myself and my needs and everything is put in the back. And as best I can, I'm just a channel for something to come through. So then once that's done, I've got to close that container and then come back to myself, my human experience. And for me, a nap or meditation or just holding a simple yoga pose is often all I need at this point. In the past, I would need a lot more actually. I would maybe need the rest of the day just to do my own thing, go for a walk, do a long yoga practice. I think and it might change again. It's always an evolving thing and it's always a situational thing. So sometimes I feel like I need more of that, sometimes less. But all that to say, the point of all that is to get back to intuition and to try to eliminate these things that take us away from our intuition. And things that take us away, again, can be TV or distractions or media or the phone or the highly addictive, program to be addictive cell phone apps with the red notifications and infinite scrolling and all this. All those things are meant to pull us away from our intuition. So, if we want to get back to our intuition, we can go all the way back to the origins of the yogic teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, which the yogic teachings, the Vedic astrology teachings, the Ayurveda, these all come from the same source text. So, the Bhagavad Gita, somewhere maybe around 500 BCE, roughly, so around 2,500 years ago, it's considered maybe the main text of spiritual guidance in India besides the Vedas and Upanishads, second only to the Bible in translations and public and published copies in circulation. So the Bible, then the Bhagavad Gita, the most circulated, most translated books in the world. Bhagavad Gita means the song of God. And Gandhi actually carried this around with him his whole life. And whenever he had a question, he would just pick a random page and it would have the guidance he needed. A lot of people do this. A lot of great teachers, philosophers reference the Bhagavad Gita as a huge inspiration. And it says in there in chapter 6, verse 6, person in their own is their own best friend and their own worst enemy. One who has conquered the mind is their best friend, while one who has failed to do so remains an enemy to the self. So again, a person is their own best friend and their own worst enemy. One who has conquered the mind is their best friend, while one who has failed to do so remains an enemy to the self. And the self in that case is the capital S true self, the Atman, our spirit, our essence. That's where intuition comes from. And then there's the small self, which is the one who we have a choice of like, how do we relate to the mind? The small self can react to everything we hear, or it can choose to respond to what we hear and what we experience. We always have a choice of how to respond to things. And the reactivity can be in the realm of reactive and not a choice for a while, especially as children. You see this in kids. They have to learn to breathe and emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. And as adults, there's still adults who need to learn this and new layers for us as adults. Even if you've done this many times, there's always new layers to have new awareness of where we get reactive, triggered, flooded, And then we can choose to slow down, pause, choose how to react and respond rather than react to that. So we have this choice of how we work with this energy, and it's an energy. And this is what so much what I've learned in the yogic path is everything is energy. Everything we do is having an energetic effect. So me holding down dog for a few minutes has an energetic effect, right? On the physical level, you know that it changes the flow of blood more to the brain and inverts the flow, the usual blood flow, which helps to increase blood flow when you stand up from down dog, helps the lymphatic drainage, which helps the immune system. So many physical things. There's physical effort of the muscles, etc., stretching, strengthening, and all of that, is happening in the body on a physical level, and we have awareness of that. And then on the mental level, what's happening internally is that we're having an energetic effect of, well, you just have to experience it. Like if you've ever done down dog, you probably know what it's like. It's the mind quiets quite a bit. The thinking mind gets quieter when we're using the physical body. The thinking mind gets quieter, right? If you just the same reason, like if you ever watch an interview with MMA fighters or a boxer, right after the fight, like right in the ring, the interviewer runs up, tell me what happened in the ring there. And they're just like a Neanderthal, like, I just gave it all I had, I just went in there and went for it. They can't really think too logically. The logical brain is not online because they had to be in this very sort of just present feeling brain, the limbic system, where they're just present and feeling and responding right away in the moment. And the amygdala is active, the fear center, all this, right? So that is where you're not so logical. And if you've ever been in a conflict with somebody and they get really reactive and somebody says, like, just calm down, it's like, no, you can't do that. This idea is like you've flipped your lid, right? So, like, you have your frontal lobes, like your thinking brain, and when you get like super reactive like that in a conflict, you flip the lid. So the thinking brain is now sort of lifted up, and all you've got is the mammal reactive brain and the reptile brain survival. So there is an energetic effect happening there. You flip your lid, or where you're just in your body, and that changes your experience of your mind. And then doing something like yoga, postures, down dog, etc., can help you quiet the mind and sort of put the lid back on, but in a calm way. So you've calmed the reptilian and the mammal brain, and then you've sort of brought back the human part of us, the frontal lobe that is thinking forethought and the future and planning and perceiving and seeing the big picture of everything again. And certain different practices have different effects. So learning yoga is really learning about energetic effects, right? You could do down dog and inversion, it's usually going to help quiet the mind. You could do something like warrior two. It's going to help focus the mind because you're literally focusing your eyes on a single spot that awakens more of these sort of beta brain waves. These are like the alert, focused brainwaves that we want when we're being productive, when we're driving, when we're problem solving, doing a test, things like this. You want the beta brainwaves to be alert and active and problem solving. And then you also want to be able to turn those off, right? So if you want to activate them, go into Warrior 2, hold that for a few minutes. Really active and engaged, really present, keeping the eyes locked in on the top of the index or middle finger. That gives you a focused gaze, a drishti, and a focused mind follows. And if you want to go into a more restorative, relaxed kind of state, activate more of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, then you can do something like child's pose or a resting pose, restorative yoga, yin yoga, things like that. So this is all about knowing how energy works in the body. And it comes back to our topic today of intuition versus overthinking, because the intuition comes in those still quiet places, and it doesn't always mean that it's like child's pose, resting, parasympathetic mode. The intuition also comes in the active beta brain waves, the sympathetic mode of the nervous system, where we're focused on a single thing. We've got strong presence and engagement, and that can also be a way to access our intuition, which is basically about conquering the mind to have this relationship to the true self. As the Bhagavad Gita teaches, person is their own best friend and their own worst enemy. So the worst enemy part comes when we don't have this relationship to the mind. We don't have these tools to focus the mind, to work with energy, to understand energy in the body. And then we can just run off the rails. And if you want to see that, just watch any modern reality TV show where people have very little self awareness and they're very reactive. And I know there's a lot of that scripted and dramatized, but it's still it's you can just look up random things on like TikTok or X.com and see people in real life acting this way. You know, it really happens where people are just reactive and then not fully present and not connected to their true self. There's that sort of extreme. There's the other side of if you haven't if well, I don't want to spoil anything, but the movie Inside Out 2 that recently came out has a great example of this issue, which I'll just say that and then move on. So I'm not going to spoil anything. But related to that topic of this other way of overthinking that can show up, or this enemy to the self that can show up, is literally just worrying about stuff. Like, let's say you've got a big test coming up and rather than like break it down and prepare for that test and just say, okay, well, I need to know X, Y, and Z, I'll study X, Y, and Z and make sure I know it. Maybe take a pre test, maybe use something like Quizlet. I really like Quizlet. If you've never used this and you're like needing to test for something, I think it's an amazing resource. I use it in my trainings actually with students because it's so good. And I've used it myself as a student learning to be a personal trainer many years ago. I had to memorize a bunch of anatomy stuff that you never use, but I had to memorize it. Quizlet helped tremendously. So when you're thinking about something like a test you need to take, just think about it, do whatever you need to do, and then think about something else, right? And this is a realization I just had recently that whenever I share it with people, they laugh out loud. But basically, the way to address overthinking is just think about the thing, and then you thought about it. Now think about something else, right? So just stop thinking about it. Right? You think about, I need to go to the store and buy groceries. You all right? You thought about it. Now think about something else. So maybe you write it down so it's on a to-do list and you get to it later. But overthinking is just like, I need to get groceries, and then you don't write it down, you don't make a plan, then you just do something else, and you think again, I need to get groceries, what should I get? And you think about something else, and you think about it again later, I need to get groceries, what should I get? Maybe I'll make a list. You know, this kind of thing is so normal, and the average person is rethinking about 80% of their thoughts in a day. Imagine how much quieter your mind could be if you just thought and then thought about something else. And then you kind of run out of things to think about after a while, and you just like want to sit and watch nature for a while. So that's overthinking. And I think a more common way that might be more applicable to this audience, people listening to this podcast, and I've met so many of you, amazing people, and I know so many brilliant people in our community and doing so many cool things. And the issues of like the reality TV show and the drama and the overreactivity, not so much an issue. It's more like you're thinking about should you move to this town or that town? And how do you know? Is it your intuition or are you just like in your head about this? Right. And that's where the 8 limbs of yoga are so valuable. Something you can do about this. So the 8 limbs of yoga, in short, are the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and then the sort of internalization of meditation. So dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So I'm going to break that down a little more real quick here. In the short version, it's a very deep topic. I've done tons of episodes in my yoga teacher training podcast about this, but it's a lifelong study. But if you can live in this way as best you can, you know, this as best you can live like this, your intuition becomes a lot clearer and the overthinking gets a lot quieter. So it's the yamas. It's basically things that you choose not to do, like not harming, not lying, not stealing, not wasting your energy, and not grasping onto things. You do those 5 things, and your mind is a lot clearer place, right? You're not doing anything to harm people as best you can, not doing anything to lie, to be deceptive as best you can, to not steal or take what's not given as best you can, to not waste your energy, and to not grasp onto things. And when you know it's time to let something go, you let it go. And you know and trust there'll be more because there's always more. The universe is abundant in nature, and we're all just renting it anyway. This body, everything, it's all rented. It's in 100 years, we'll all be worm food or dust. It's just the reality of it. So we don't grasp all that, and we do our best to live in a kind, fair, honest way. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. Nobody is. I wouldn't trust anyone who thinks they are. I'm certainly not, but I do my best to live by those values. And it does, if you're lying to somebody, it makes your mind a lot more chaotic place, and you got to kind of keep this lie alive in your head, and it's very stressful, and it's a lot to hold on to. Or if you're stealing from somebody, there's a sort of moral issue in there, and there's a something just you don't quite feel like an honest person when you have that, right? It's hard to be as honest and true to yourself when you're not being true to others. Right? Just examples, obviously. And then there's the niyamas, the things that you do. So cleanliness, contentment, discipline, self-study, and trust in some sort of bigger force, higher power, universe, God, call it what you want. Ishvari Pranidhana is what we say in the Vedic teachings. But again, cleanliness, taking good care of yourself. Humans are very cleanly creatures. A lot of mammals are. Cats constantly cleaning themselves. Ants as well, constantly cleaning. Right. So I think it's just in the nature of living beings to want to have a clean life generally, unless you're a pig, a literal the animal pig. They like dirt and certain other things, other animals. But yeah. So there's generally cleanliness, taking care of yourself, and then contentment, appreciating what you have, and then what you have appreciates in value. And if you don't appreciate what you have, you just suffer so much more. There's always this sense of not enough, lack. So contentment is very important. Each of these is. And then there's tapas, which is discipline, having something you care about, right? If you're just content, you just lay around and do nothing, right? But when you add discipline, passion, this is how we have microphones and computers and technology and phones and all the amazing things we get to enjoy in life, all the uh, luxuries and conveniences, because somebody applied their discipline, their tapas, to make it happen. And you are here to do that in a particular way in your dharma. In svadhyaya, self-study, is where you help figure out what that dharma is and what your purpose is through self-awareness, meditation, journaling, reading about people who have lived their dharma, these kind of things. And then trust in a higher power. That's ultimately not about you, right? It's not if you succeed or fail, you just know that you did your best. And the fruits of the labor are not up to you. You plant the seed, you nurture the tree, but what you harvest is not really up to you. It's the sort of grace of God or universe or source, whatever you call it, the weather, whatever you want to call it, is some forces way bigger than ourselves that we cannot control. And when we're connected to that, that is intuition. That's where the intuition comes from. The overthinking comes from not doing all these things, right? You start harming people, your mind's going to be a little more chaotic. You start lying and stealing and wasting your energy, especially the sexual energy, your mind is going to become a lot more active and scattered. And you're not clean, not content, not disciplined, not self aware, and believing it's all up to you, like you're in control of everything in the universe, you're going to be in a much more chaotic mental state, right? Those are just the first two limbs of the eight limbs of yoga. And within those two, there's 10 things in there. It's a lot, right? And just you could live with just one of those for years, just living with non harming, right? The Jain tradition, they walk around avoiding stepping on insects. They spend their whole life trying not to harm anything. I think that's a little extreme because it's just unavoidable, right? Even in your sleep, like you're gonna at some point in ingest an insect. Sorry, it just happens. Uh, if you drive a car, you're at some point gonna hit a fly on the road. So you can't avoid it to some degree, but within reason, you can try to not. There's an extreme that way, and there's an extreme the other way. But you can live in the way of not harming, not lying, not stealing, not wasting energy, not grasping, cleanliness, contentment, discipline, self-study, and trust in a higher power. And your mind is going to be a lot clearer. Your intuition is going to have a lot more easier access to your being. And again, this is stuff we go in way deeper in the yoga teacher training program coming up. And you can get on the wait list, Quiet Mind at yoga/YTT, to hear about that event coming up on 9/9. And the other 8 limbs now is the asana. Next is the asana. Most people just know yoga as asana, and they just start there and they stay there. And that's okay. That's fine. It's a physical exercise. It's great. But you're missing so much if you just do that. And you're going to get more into this overthinking versus intuition issue, because just doing the physical asana without the breath awareness, without the energetic awareness, without the internal practice, it's just exercise. And you can be in a shape, you can be in down dog and just worrying about your money and worrying about your relationship and rehashing and ruminating about some issue that happened earlier today. And I remember when I was a teenager, I ruminated a lot. And this is what led me to finding meditation and yoga, because I would try to sleep and just replay the whole day. And I should have said this, and why didn't I say that? And what did they think of me? And what if, oh, if I said this, they would think I was so smart and funny and all this, and I would just get stuck there. And I ended up getting into depression, like very stuck emotionally for a while. And meditation and yoga is what got me out of it, helped me thaw that out, getting unstuck. And I also liked going to a yoga class, and like, well, I couldn't wear my headphones anymore. I would go to the gym and wear my headphones so I could be in my mind and body divorced. But in yoga, the mind and body are together, no distractions. So asana ideally is the place where the mind and body unite, come together, yoga, and then we can have this more fully present experience. And then we have pranayama after that. So once you're in the body, mind and body and spirit together, then you work with prana, energy, and manipulate it in ways to have different effects. Whether it's retaining the breath to practice holding more energy, or suspending the breath out to practice letting go of energy, or emphasizing the inhale to practice receiving, or emphasizing the exhale to practice letting go. There's so much within the breath, and we all breathe automatically, and it just happens. But it's the one thing that is the bridge from unconscious to conscious. I think it's so fascinating because we can't consciously beat our own heartbeat or pump our blood or blink. We can blink the eyes consciously, yeah, but that's different. I mean, that's not that's not really doing anything other than cleaning the eyeballs. But we can have all these involuntary processes, right? The hair grows, the nails grow, the body grows involuntarily. There's no conscious effort. But with the breath, it can be unconscious and automatic, or it can become conscious and intentional. It is the bridge from living an unconscious life to a conscious life. And it's the bridge in the 8 limbs of yoga, the fourth limb of yoga, the bridge from being conscious about all these material things, how we interact with others, how we relate to the world, how we move our bodies, to now how we work with energy from the physical into the subtle. And the following limbs of yoga are all very subtle. So to do that kind of work, you need to go from unconscious to conscious. So again, you look at the metaphor, the image of somebody on a reality TV show, super reactive, triggered, blowing up, screeching. That's unconscious and reactive. They flip the lid. But if that person, from their own volition, that has to come from within, decides to take a breath and consciously breathe, they will change their physiology and their mental state very quickly. Even from that flipped lid, total reactivity, reptile, fight or flight, life or death kind of reactive state, you can still, just through the breath, get back into conscious, intentional presence again. Now, that's a dramatization, exaggeration, but for ourselves, when the anxiety kicks in, when you're overthinking, when you're like, should I do this? Should I do that? What about this? There's too many things. It's overwhelming. I'm frozen. That's the time to just like lay down or sit down. I like laying down because it just promotes more relaxation, whereas sitting is If I want to be in more of a active state, an alert state, I'll sit. If I want to get into more rest, relaxed state, I'll lay down. Right? It's not that sitting is better. Sometimes people get this perception in meditation or pranayama, you have to sit. Sitting is the way. If you're not sitting, you're lazy or whatever. No, it's just a different effect. Everything is a different effect. And it's just choosing what effect you want. So anyway, if you want to get out of the overthinking, the breath is an incredibly powerful way. If you want to get more conscious, more aware of yourself, more intentional, the breath is an incredible way. And it works so well with kids that are open to it. They have to want to do it. All this, we get into this realm, it all has to be volitional. Even if a parent is very influential or somebody's very influential, they say, you need to do this. It has to come from within. It's the only way. So from within, the child decides to take a breath. They notice their body is flooded, they're reactive, they're strong emotion. Take a breath. They can change their physiology, their state almost instantly. So yoga posture can kind of do this. Like um, I think of it as yoga and breath together, right? Like my example of doing down dog the other day, and like I've done many times, it's just getting into the posture in the body so I can quickly get to the breath. So the body is now still and inverted, which is great for clearing the mind, quieting the mind. And now I just focus on breathing. So the breath becomes like an ocean wave, like a soundtrack, like a podcast I'm listening to, the inhales and the exhales, and slowing it down, not forcing it, but just going from a lot of energy in the system to just one thing. Just inhale and exhale. And then the body relaxes a bit, the nervous system relaxes a bit, and everything kind of settles. And you bring more awareness into the body. And then you can start to go into pratyahara, which is within the body, withdrawing the senses. So now you are going more within, internal. You might close your eyes and the sense of the five senses. So sight, closing your eyes, touch, you're not moving your hands or touching around anything. You're just like in one position. Sound, you're just listening within to the sound of the breath rather than to something external like music or whatever. Right. So you can't do pratyahara if you've got music or external things pulling your attention. It kind of can, but it's actually a more advanced practice because you really just got to pull your energy and attention fully inward, and all you really hear is this inner sort of sound, like a ocean wave or kind of like a seashell. If you put it up to your ear, that's the kind of sound you want to hear internally. And then the other senses like taste, you're just not tasting anything, and smell and not smelling anything. So no fragrances, also very important in the yoga practice. So all of this, again, to get to your true self, to get to be a channel of intuition. And now doing this all the time is what leads to being able to like do astrology readings. And it's just like a natural thing you can get into. And there's a form of intuition, like as an astrologer for others, intuiting. And there's a form of intuition for yourself. That's being centered and fully in your body, not being a channel for other information and other people's perspective, but a channel for just the divine above and the ground below, the earth, and what my teacher would call divine alignment. Right? You're rooted to the ground and open to the stars and centered in between, and you are the vessel for energy to move through you, which is different than being a vessel for others. That's a different kind of intuition to serve others. Both very important in the yogic and the astrology path. So we've talked about the five limbs now. Again, the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara, bringing the senses within. Then there's dharana. And again, a lot of people just jump to this. This is concentration. So having a point of focus, single point of focus, which you could just focus on the breath. That's okay. It's okay to just jump to that. But it's even better when you do this, you kind of live in this way sequentially, try to do your best to apply all this in your life, which again sounds like a lot, but it's a lifelong journey. And then you get to this dharana, concentration. And that's like you focus on the breath, you focus on a mantra, you focus on a mudra, you focus on a candle. These are all examples of dharana. But typically on the yogic path, eventually it's just focusing on the breath internally, and that's it. At a certain point, the next two limbs happen to you. You can't make them happen. You can't consciously choose to do them. You can only consciously choose to do the first six limbs of yoga, and then the last two happen to you. And this is where you're really in the flow state, in intuition, in presence. The thinking mind is so far away from this part of your experience. And what they are is dhyana, which means you're absorbed in the concentration. So for a while, it's I'm focusing on the breath. I notice the inhale, I notice the exhale. Feeling the inhale, feeling the exhale. You feel the sensations, you're fully with it. And at a certain point, dhyana happens or it doesn't. It might not happen, but it might happen where there's no longer the sense of conscious me is choosing to focus on breathing, but it's just happening. Now, you've experienced this if you've played sports and gotten into a flow state or made music and gotten in a flow state. You're singing a song and you're in flow state. You've set the circumstances for that to happen. You've learned the skill, you've learned the lyrics, whatever, and now it can just flow through you. You did all the preliminary parts of essentially dharana, of like if you learn a song inside and out, now you can just sing it and there's no conscious like, oh yeah, this word comes after that word and I got to pronounce this syllable that way. The conscious mind is not involved. You are just present. That's dhyana. Then samadhi is the sort of side effect of that that may or may not happen, which is this state of bliss and peace. It's like flow on steroids. It's like, yeah, you're in the present moment. It's everything's just happening. Time disappears, but it's just euphoric. It's amazing. Like, I think I've experienced it. I think I've experienced it quite a few times, but I think I've not experienced it most of the time because it's spontaneous and you can't fully control it, but you can influence the circumstances for it. And it can be like an orgasmic, blissful, transcendent, profound thing. Uh, it can be like that. It can also just be this very still, profound thing that it's like standing on a mountain and just looking at an amazing mountain view or ocean view or whatever. There's a moment of that, just taking it in. And there's not the sense of separation. There's not the sense of thinking about it. It's just there. I think the closest word I like to think of is awe. And I think life is well lived if we have a lot of moments of awe, but it's not quite it either. It's you can't really put words on it. You could break it down. Samadhi, it's basically like equanimity. And if you break down the etymology of the Sanskrit, equanimity is kind of a weak word for it, though. But I also don't want to make it sound too magical or mystical or unattainable, but it's like the state of flow. And if you've experienced the state of flow, you've probably experienced it. It's that feeling where time disappears, you're just present, you're just in the moment. You can experience it playing sports, playing with kids, playing music, just having fun, playing games, anything where you're creative, expressing. Artists experience this, making art. So that's a version of this, a version of samadhi. And that's intuition. And it's very different than the overthinking, where it's like, what about this? What about that? Overthinking is usually fast, loud, anxious, worried, fearful. And again, I recommend you see the movie Inside Out too. I don't want to ruin anything, but it's a great understanding of the emotional landscape. Great way to understand it. So when we are overthinking, that's when our chitta is all vritti. So not chitra, the nakshatra, but chitta. Chitta is uh, the mind, and vritti is a disturbance of the mind or fluctuation of the mind. So chitta vritti. And in the Yoga Sutra, back then, the sutra format, the very most essential thing was always put at the beginning of the text. So Sutra 1.1, now the teaching of yoga. Sutra 1.2, the most important thing, yoga is the quieting of the mind, or yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. So we are experiencing yoga when we quiet the mind. And keep in mind, this yoga we're talking about is the 8 limbs. So it's not just asana, it's not just doing down dog, but as best you can, doing the 8 limbs, knowing it's a lifelong practice, knowing we're imperfect. It's not about perfection or judgment or anything like that. But as best we can, we do apply the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. And then the quieting of the mind is the natural effect of that. And then Sutra 1.3, we can abide in our true self. And the true self is still, quiet, calm, content, not reactive, not loud. So when somebody is in that super reactive, loud, big, flipping their lid kind of moment, you can know that they are in that reactive state and have compassion for them and know that it's going to be hard to get out of that, right? Because they've lost the connection to their true selves. The ego has taken over, the small self has taken over. And in that place, you can't just be logical or say calm down or anything like that. They've got to express it and they've got to choose to want to change their state, maybe through the breath. Breath is the quickest access point, better than the mind, because the mind will fight back. The mind will push back, react, whatever. But the breath is just the breath. There's no story behind inhale and exhale. I think for probably 99% of people, maybe somebody disagrees, but there's no story behind the breathing. There's no emotion necessarily behind the breathing, but the breathing can create an emotional reaction. If you breathe short, shallow breaths, hyperventilate, you'll get more anxious. You breathe slow, deep belly breaths, you'll probably get more relaxed. Probably, not always, but you'll activate more likely the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. So, yoga is the quieting of the mind. Yoga is chitta, vritti, nirodha. The mind is loud when we're overthinking. The mind is quiet when we're in intuition. Right? So, how do you know you're in intuition? The mind is quiet, calm, still, consistent. How do you know you're in overthinking? The mind is loud, fast, not relaxed, inconsistent, and reckless, chaotic. Signs of being in the overthinking: tension in the body, shallow breathing, restlessness, fidgeting, these kind of things. Yoga, breath work, pranayama, presence, meditation calms this monkey mind, right? In the Buddhist tradition, they call it the monkey mind. And also in the Buddhist tradition, I really like this way of thinking about it. The Buddha quoted as saying, the true nature of the mind is not this beautiful, peaceful, relaxed state. And people who say that, they've got it mixed up. People think our true state is calm and relaxed. The true self, the Atman, the soul is, yes. But the true state of the mind, of the small self, the mind is perceiving, analyzing, judging. True state of the mind is like a garden. A garden left on its own without tending to it will become overrun and choked out with weeds. And the beautiful garden that you want to have will be killed, or at least smothered out and taken over. Same thing with the mind. If you don't tend to the mind, it will become overrun with weeds. And tending to the mind means stepping back to the true capital S self to observe, doing yoga to still the fluctuations of the mind, to quiet the mind. This is where I get the name Quiet Mind Astrology, Quiet Mind Yoga. It's going back to that origin of what this is really all about. And it doesn't mean your mind is always quiet and you never think about anything. It just means that you have this access to the true self and you can quiet the mind. You have some level of choice in the matter, not just reactive. And now you can be responsive. So the true nature of the mind is like a garden will become overrun with weeds. But so we've got to tend to the garden, pull the weeds out, choose the things we want to plant in the garden, choose the thoughts we want to create and cultivate, and the behaviors we want to cultivate. And as we think, so comes our action, and then our deeds, and then our personality, and then our reputation, and everything in our life starts with the thoughts. And the thoughts that we choose to think can come from this small mind, reactive monkey mind, or they can come from the true self intuition beyond, right? And as an astrologer, if you're an astrologer listening, the best insights will come from that beyond the Atman, the true self, beyond the small mind. The small mind is there to like try to filter it and understand it and process it. Like, okay, it can play out like this, and you have this possible expression, that possible expression. But where that's really coming from is the true self. And that true self is that channel is strengthened through yoga. Like that's so essential. And I personally resonate and follow and trust the most the astrologers who have a yoga practice. And if they don't, it's pretty obvious because they get way more sucked up into the drama, the reactivity, the ego, the looking good, all this kind of stuff. And they don't have this emphasis on the true self. So, chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. How do we tell the difference between intuition and overthinking? Well, the 5 ways I've talked about a lot already, but the 5 ways I wrote down in my notes to talk about. Number one, self study, svadhyaya. So, using yoga meditation for self study. And when you study yourself and notice your patterns, you notice where you get reactive, you notice where you get running off on tangents, anxious, you get hung up on things, and you notice when you are centered, still, calm, quiet in your true self. The true self desires will persist. You don't have to write them down. You actually don't have to make a list because they will show up tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And if it's move to this new city or move to this new whatever, take this job or start this program or whatever, that will be there tomorrow and the next day and the next day. The thinking mind might try to rationalize it. Well, it doesn't really make sense. I don't know. And that's where the next few will come into play. So, number two is emotional balance, emotional awareness. So, the emotions can take over here of like, well, I I feel like I want to move. Like for me, I'll use myself as an example. I felt called to move to Mexico, but the emotional issue of like letting go of all my stuff in California where I lived before and in Austin before that, those were very challenging emotional moves, like to let go of the stuff, to let go of the connections there, the friendships, the events. It was very emotional. And I had to feel all of that. And each day still feel this call to adventure of like, this is the place to go. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's scary, uncertain, but this feels right. It's still quiet and calm, but the emotions were more like fear, anxious, sadness, loss. But the true self was calm, centered, clear, consistent. This is the direction to go. So the emotions are going to be there, and you can't override them. You can't negate them. They're important to feel. And they were a healthy sense of grief and loss of like, okay, this chapter is ending and I'm moving forward. And it's still, there's also the sense of excitement underneath that, but I have to feel the sadness and the grief. And yes, there is a sense of excitement and hopefulness and fun and beauty and awe in where I chose to move. Like I feel the sense of awe every day looking at nature. So it's a big part of why I was called this way. So the emotional part is very important to be aware of. And through asana and pranayama practices, especially, you can feel this stuff. And pranayama especially helps you, like, okay, you feel some sadness. That's usually like a heaviness in the chest, a constriction in the breathing, and you breathe into it and feel. And the feeling will usually move pretty quick when you actually just let it be felt. And the grief moves, tears might come, sadness might come, fear might come, whatever. But just feeling it, breathing into it, like you can breathe right into that sensation, the constriction or whatever, then it starts to move. And the emotion needs to move. It's energy in motion. And it's a healthy, natural response to feel grief over a loss, to feel, then after that, maybe to feel more of the excitement of the new possibilities in the new situation. And pranayama is such a great place to feel that. Number three, way to tell the difference in overthinking and intuition is through cultivating sattva. Sattva is the guna of purity. So if I am continually living a more sattvic life, eating fruits and vegetables, natural food as best I can, time in nature, sunlight, sun, healthy, clean water, sleep, these are great ways to cultivate sattva. That is a clearer state of mind and being, and then my perception is clear, and I can tell if something is more sattvic, like this move was more sattvic, and staying felt more tamasic and rajasic and that part of California is very rajasic and tamasic actually. And I was feeling called towards this more sattvic place and more sattvic part of my life to really like go deep into my work and my personal path and all this and personal growth and work with all these healers here in Mexico. It's amazing. But a lot of that clarity came through trying to do things to get more sattvic and centered and trying to do less things of more tamas and rajas. So tamasic things are like highly processed foods, watching a lot of TV, scrolling a lot on the phone. It's inertia, it's heaviness, it's dense. Doing things like smoking marijuana is more tamasic. It slows you down. You feel heavy and dense. Uh, Things like alcohol are more rajasic. It's more of this activating kind of fire energy. Eating spicy foods, drinking coffee is more rajasic. So the more rajasic and tamasic stuff you do, the less sattvic energy space you have, right? Because you have limited time, limited choices every day of your life. And if you fill up your time with more sattvic choices, you're going to have more clarity and purity of your mind. Now, this is not a judgment thing. This is not like something to shame yourself or beat yourself up about. It's a thing to just have awareness of energy again and awareness of choice. So you have a choice between a donut or a banana. You know, a donut is tamasic, a banana is sattvic. And if you're gonna make that choice, make it consciously, right? You can choose to do tamasic things that if you want to bring yourself back down into the material world more and ground more, feel heavier, denser, that's fine. It's a choice. It's just a choice now you have. It's not that it's better or worse, it's a choice. But generally, all of the old texts say you want a more sattvic life as best you can. And when you cultivate sattva, you're cultivating a clearer channel for intuition. And when you cultivate rajas and tamas, you're cultivating a channel of overthinking and less clarity, more fogginess, more reactivity, more density, more inertia. Number four way to tell the difference between overthinking and intuition is through having grounding practices, working with your root chakra, the center at the base of the spine, through literally like sitting on the ground, walking barefoot on the ground. If you live in a city, it is very possible that you have not touched your bare feet to the ground in months, maybe even years. This is very common in major cities. Even for me, living in Austin for a long time, this was happening way more than I want to. Because I had a trail by my house, but it, yeah, for a long time I didn't have a trail, and then when I did, a trail was like muddy a lot, so walking barefoot was kind of a pain. It's very easy in a major city to just wear shoes everywhere and never touch your bare feet on the ground. So bare feet on the ground somehow, even if it's just for a few minutes every now and then, grounding, it really does make a difference. And there's been a lot of great research on this. If you think it's just woo woo, there's actually scientific research, but also just do it, just feel it, and you'll know what I'm talking about. If you have any sensitivity at all in your body, you'll feel how good it feels for your body to get your feet on the earth. And that is connecting you in divine alignment to the earth energy to make more grounded choices, to make clearer choices. Grounded choices are slow, calm, relaxed, consistent, just like the roots of a tree, just like the trees, they grow slow, calm, and consistent. If you want to grow slow, calm, and consistent, get grounded. You can have rapid change in your life. You can have major breakthroughs and growth. I certainly have a lot of that. So, you can have both. But if it's at the expense of grounding, you're more likely to get scattered, overwhelmed, anxious, have these issues of overthinking, all this stuff. Overthinking is energy up in the head, in the mind, not intuition, not in the crown, not channeling. It's just like logical, mental overthinking. So you're thinking and then you're thinking again and thinking again about the same thing. So grounding just pulls your energy down, like it drains down into your feet, into the earth. There's a lot more you can do with this. I'll keep it simple for now, but eating root vegetables, things that grow in the ground, can also help with this if that's in your diet. And just physically being on the ground, sitting on the ground, walking on the ground can all help strengthen your intuition. Being ungrounded, and if you want to try, if you want to really challenge yourself, like Morgan Spurlock would do, these kind of crazy challenges of masochism, you could try not touching the ground for a year. Wouldn't recommend. It sounds really excruciating, like awful. But you could try it. Just never let your feet touch the ground. Never let your hands touch the ground or a tree for a year, and just see what happens to your mind. Just that's the only change you make. And I think your mind would be a much more chaotic place if you did that. And the number 5 way to tell the difference between intuition and overthinking is having times in silence and stillness. So in the silence and stillness, most of my best ideas come through there. And it's not doing that to get ideas, but it's just a place of clarity and space. So if you always listen to a podcast, always listen to music, always have something on, maybe try giving yourself a little bit of the opposite. Opposites bring balance in Ayurveda, and just have time in stillness. Just sit in meditation. Just set a timer for 15 minutes and sit until the timer goes off. No sound, no stimuli. Maybe there's a fan on or something. Maybe you're just noticing your breath, but that quiet is so valuable. I love to sit by the ocean. A lot of great clarity and calmness comes through that. And again, it's not doing this to get ideas. I think that becomes a grasping and a self will kind of thing. It's kind of opposite of Ishvari Pranidhana. It's okay. You can meditate with purpose. You could say you want to meditate and get clarity on a situation. Totally valid. Or you could just sit and meditate for the sake of just sitting and meditating. And then whatever arises needs to arise. You might ask, you might have an intention. You might ask, show me what I need to be aware of in this moment, or how may I be of service today? Or these kind of things are great questions to ask. And it can be very simple, right? There's a lot more complexity, a lot more layers, nuance you could add to this, but the simplest thing is just sit comfortably. And sitting in this case has an effect of being more alert. And this is a way to strengthen your intuition and quiet the mind. You could lay down and meditate, set a 15-minute timer. This is more to relax and recenter. So you could do that too. But just again, everything has an energetic effect, and it's knowing the effect and being intentional with it is what matters. And these are 5 ways you can cultivate and tell the difference between intuition and overthinking: self study, emotional awareness, cultivating sattva, grounding, and time in stillness. Essentially, doing yoga practice, doing pranayama practice, living a sattvic lifestyle that includes diet, exercise, yoga, meditation, breath work, grounding, typically time in nature. We're also working with the root chakra, the energy center of grounding, and then time in silence, which is typically meditation, especially at its final stage of samadhi, the 8 limbs of yoga. So again, if you want to go deeper with all this, much deeper, check out quietmind.yoga/YTT. Join the waitlist for the next teacher training, where you get a lot of experience practicing all these things and cultivating your intuition. So, little recap of all that, and then we'll talk about the transits happening this week from August 16th. So, again, to recap, in the Bhagavad Gita, the source text of all of these teachings of yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic astrology, It says, a person is their own best friend and their own worst enemy. One who has conquered the mind is their best friend, while one who has failed to do so remains an enemy to the self. And you can conquer the mind and be your own best friend through the 8 limbs of yoga. And that's yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. You will memorize that if you practice it and teach it, or you learn it. And if you ever want to teach it, you'll teach that in the teacher training. I share that. But if you practice these 8 limbs, then your mind can become clearer and you can get connected to your true self and the intuition and quiet the chitta vritti, the fluctuations of the mind. Yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind. Yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. You know you're in overthinking when you feel tension, shallow breathing, restlessness. You know you're in the true self and intuition when you feel calm, still, centered, and consistent. And you can really tell the difference when you're regularly practicing yoga, pranayama, sattvic lifestyle, grounding, and time in silence. Woof. Big topic today and super important topic, right? Intuition is essentially at the foundation of everything in life, really. It's like the foundation of all of our decision making and all of the life alignment I talk about. Getting in alignment means you're listening to your intuition and you're not just doing what you think someone else thinks you should do or reactive. You're living from your authentic true self and it's centered in yourself. So hopefully this is helpful in gaining that perspective. Now, let's talk about the transits happening this week from August 16th to 21st. We've got a few interesting ones to talk about. So, first, on August 16th, the sun moves into Leo in Maga for 30 days in Leo, 13 days in Maga. Sun's in its own sign, very powerful here and very influential, where you can step into greater roles of leadership in your life, greater sense of inner authority, greater sense of confidence and creativity. This is the time to be more of your extroverted self, to be more expressive, more playful, do your creative projects and put those out into the world. Connect with leaders and teachers and guides, step into roles of leadership yourself, take on more responsibility. It's a powerful, creative, fun energy. Celebrate, have fun with friends. In the MAGA section for August 16th for 13 days, that's a time to connect with your tradition of like what has worked in the past for you, what is part of your history and your family. There's a sense of letting go of old attachments and identities. It's an opportunity to let go of who you think you're supposed to be as a leader or what you think it should mean to be a leader and have responsibilities and let go of some old ways that are not working anymore so you can step into new ways that do work. On August 19th, we've got the full moon in Dhanishta in Aquarius. The moon is near Saturn during this. So, this is a good day to lay low, to do meditative spiritual practices, no major decisions. Take time to celebrate what's happened over the past few weeks in August so far. Gratitudes are very powerful. Even just 5 minutes of gratitude journaling on August 19th, very favorable. And also a great time for listening to music and creating music. Danishta is symbolized by a drum and allowing yourself to be the instrument of life, of how is the universe using you and your song, your way of expressing to collaborate in the symphony of life and finding your sort of way of what role are you playing in the roles in your life and how can you better play that role in service to the whole picture, like obviously on a team and work of like owning your responsibilities and your role and how you can contribute more there in the family dynamics. That's very true. If you are it's like and you're running your own business, how you're contributing to your market and your clients and finding ways to better play the role that you play. And just like a drum has a very important role in a song of keeping the beat, there's a role that you're playing in your life that you can help keep the rhythm of and play that role in a new perspective now in this full moon and stepping into a new way of approaching that. And Aquarius as well, very innovative energy, Saturn being here all throughout the year, bringing a lot of innovation throughout technology and things like that. So Danishta also means wealth of spiritual knowledge. Great day for spiritual practices. August 20th, Jupiter in Mrigashira. We talked about this one on the monthly episode. Check that out if you missed it. But this is a great time for exploring lots of new ideas. I said a lot more on the monthly one, so check that one out. I'll talk more about this week again. Mercury moving into Cancer via retrograde and then Auslatia. So August 21st, Mercury going back through Auslatia and needing to clear up some miscommunications and go deeper into your spiritual path. Auslatia is a very deep, transformative spiritual energy. This is a great time for going back over any communications or things you've learned or training, audios, audiobooks about spiritual growth, about Kundalini yoga, things like this, Kundalini energy, the potential within. And in relationship, there may be some secretive or internal or under the surface kind of things to rehash and review and go back over. Maybe some misunderstandings to reevaluate in your friendships and in your emotional relationships. This could be intimate partnerships, friendships, wherever there's this more emotional bond in relationship. This is a good time for some huge healing to come through and resolution and clarification there. Great time for learning about anything spiritual, any kind of astrology studies. Wonderful. And Mercury will go forward in Auslatia after that in September. It's basically the next month. Wonderful time for learning astrology and any sort of spiritual thing like that. Also, on that day, Venus goes into Uttara Falguni on August 21st. And Venus here is in a Sun nakshatra, and it's ruled by the Sun, which is a great enemy placement. So this is a time where you want to relax, but your responsibilities making it more difficult to relax. So it's very important to very much manage your responsibilities and try to stay on top of them. Saturn is aspecting all of this. So there is this sense of duty here where Venus wants to just relax and get in the hammock and chill. But all of this other stuff is pointing to you got to handle your responsibilities, you got to stay on top of things, and you got to kind of earn your rest, which I don't really agree with that principle in general. But at this time, for 10 days, August 21st to 31st, it is a time where you may need to do this. And basically, just show up to your dharma, your purpose, your responsibilities, do your best, and show up fully until you need to rest and stop, and then rest and stop. And don't try to get out of responsibilities here. Don't try to be irresponsible. Don't try to push it off, delay it. And if you do, I think this will bring out the more positive side. Time in meditation, also very favorable. Time in nature, gardening, and being very dutiful and helpful to your spouse or loved ones brings out the positive side of this. So, doing something of service to your partner, helping them, just focus on serve, 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 help, help, help. And not to the expense of your health or your finances or your mental health, but you probably have more capacity than you think. So this is the time where the universe is showing you what you're really capable of, how much you can give, how much you can serve. Just 10 days here where you're tested like this and you can move forward, but use this energy to show yourself what you're really capable of, how much you can serve, how grounded you can be, how responsible you can be, and know it will pass. And then you can enjoy some rest as well within all that. But it's an interesting transit with all this stuff going on right now. So I see it that way. Hopefully that's helpful and not scary. But if you approach Saturn transits like this or Saturn influence like this and challenging things like this with a sense of opportunity, of like you're going into a workshop of life, you're going into an opportunity to learn something about yourself. It's wonderful. And the ancient yogis, and there's still yogis today who do this, they'll do extreme tapas, extreme discipline, tapasya practice. So, like holding your arm overhead for your entire life. There's somebody alive today in India doing that. You can Google this. extreme things like this, staying standing your entire life, never sitting down, never laying down. Can you imagine? Right. And there's yogis who are doing that is their yoga practice. That is their tapas, their discipline. And there's interviews with these people and they're asked, why do you do this? And they'll say things like, if I can do this, what excuse do you have about whatever challenge you have in your life? If I could give up my right arm to hold it overhead my entire life and not be able to use my right arm, which he was born, he was right-handed before he started this. And that's, that's how we do so much in our lives. Give that up. What's possible for you? What excuse do you have? And it's said in a playful way, usually like this. Yogi shows us what's possible, and then we see what's possible for us, and we can look at our own lives and see where we might be playing small or making excuses or not showing up or not doing our best. Not with judgment, not shame or anything like that, but just showing that we're probably capable of more than we think we are. And when we think we're done, we probably still have more to give. And just for the sake of just seeing what's possible, seeing it as energy and that we are not limited and that we are not just this shell, this body, this form, we are more than that. And we have the opportunity to explore beyond just this form and experience new states of consciousness, new states of connection, new states of awareness. So that's some of the things, the opportunities that we have in the transits this week. Hopefully that's helpful, inspiring, and interesting. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to go deeper into your yoga studies and better understand your own intuition, your own mind, yoga is the best way to do it. So Quiet Mind at yoga/YTT, where you can learn more and get on the wait list for the next yoga teacher training and the special event coming up on 9/9/24. And if you see this later, you can still go there and join the waitlist for the next class when I do it again. So thank you for listening or watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast.